Okay. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining. We'll see, it might be a few more. There you go. Trickling in as we get going. There's only a few things from me you'll be glad to hear today, and then I'm going to hand over to Ed Noyes from Wild Trout Trust, who's got a really nice presentation for us. Me and Ed have bumped into each other at a few conferences now, and then we bumped into each other again at a conference in Bristol. We're like, we need to actually let's get something moving on the collaboration, because I think we've got a really nice partnership where obviously Water Quality Monitor Network, we've got a lot of water quality data, but there's a hell of a lot more to that when it comes to actually doing sort of improvements on the river, and have well other things than water quality, which Ed will talk all about later on. A few things from me first. So I can see Janet's on the call. Janet brought to my attention an issue around her catchment with the online map. Be glad to hear after me saying that would be fixed quite a while ago. It is now. Hopefully tomorrow that'll be done. Finally, there was basically a few issues with a few of the sites, which the only way to really do it was I went through manually through every single site again, and found a handful of errors in a few different sites as well. But us having 12,000 samples now, that took a little while. So
respect, I think.
Yeah, it took a while. But yeah, that they'll be back online. So you might have noticed there's been no updates on the online map for sort of the last few months of data. I'll add that all in. I'll definitely upload a map tomorrow. Whether it has the latest data, I don't know. If not, that'll get added next month. So for most of you, there'll probably be no change, but Janet's will definitely be fixed, which is good news. And then, yeah, as part of that, I enlisted the help. We've got Isla Thorpe from the University of York, who's been busy cracking on with the third annual report. She's got 2 weeks left, and a sort of big list of things that to be getting on with. She has kindly accepted doing a webinar at some point to speak in a bit of detail about the report, about her approach, and anything else sort of water quality related. So we're looking to get the annual report out in January. So that'll be out then, which should be a really nice piece of work, hopefully. The two things which we're adding to what we've done previously is more work doing site-specific calculations. So she's working with the Environment Agency and NRW's databases to get some more site-specific comparisons, which we've not quite got to that granularity in previous reports. So that'll be really good to get that, and also an extra section on chalk streams. We're going to get some analysis done on that as well. If we have time, then I'll see if there's anything else we can do as well. But for the moment, it looks like that might be the sort of extent of it. But that'll be at least a few extra things in a bit more detail than we've had in previous reports. And again, yeah, that should be out in January. Yeah, Isla's been brilliant. So once that is, we'll get another webinar going up in the new year for her to speak a bit more about it and answer any questions that anyone's got about the findings of the report. Finally, from me, very briefly, is we've got a story about the Environment Agency and fish kills, to sort of get this over the line with the media. What we're wondering is if anyone, and I think I put a call out for this before, both on the webinars and also on the newsletters, if anyone has reported a fish kill and the Environment Agency hasn't turned up, then let us know, because a few stories from anyone who's got experience of that would go a long way to getting that over the line. For some, yeah, we've got some interesting stuff that we've found out from the EA on that. So yeah, any stories, let me know. That is really all there is from me today. Because the main thing is Ed Noyes. So I'll let Ed introduce himself, and and hopefully the technology prevails and Ed can present. There you go. That was the moment of truth, Ed. I'm glad that's worked.
I'll just unmute myself. So, hi everyone. Good to see you all. So yeah, I'm Ed Noyes. I'm conservation officer for the Wild Trout Trust in the Midlands and West. So kind of covering Gloucestershire, Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Warwickshire, that kind of neck of the woods. We're a national organisation, and Alex has kindly invited me along tonight just to talk about some additional stuff to water quality. So we'll have a little bit of a delve into that, and a little bit of a chat about who the Wild Trout Trust are. So let's do this from the beginning. There we go. So what is the Wild Trout Trust? River conservation charity, formed in 1997. Generally a bunch of very keen anglers, I think is the best place to put it. So I know I'm amongst kindred spirits this evening. We've got the Angling Trust, and I'm sure many of you fish as well. So it's really about concerns with fish stocks, the state of the rivers, a lot of habitat degradation that was being seen, and a bunch of like-minded individuals just got together, decided to do something about it. So we've now developed into, I think we're now at 10 conservation officers, a handful of other staff in support around that and doing other things. So national coverage, and one of my colleagues works over in the Republic of Ireland as well. So all around the British Isles and the island of Ireland as well. Main output of the trust is to look at physical habitat restoration for trout, and we'll touch on why trout, and it's not just about trout, but it's sort of a single species for a specific reason, and all about physical habitat and what those trout need to thrive. And then spread messages on trout conservation. So there's a lot of sort of advocacy for game fish within the organisation and what they stand for, and also all about getting people involved. So it's not just a standalone talking shop for, we all love trout and we know about trout. It's sort of getting the word out there, getting as many people involved, whatever walk of life, whether they fish or not as well. It's becoming increasingly more important. It's not just about people that go fishing. Anyone that loves rivers, we're here to try and get them involved and do some good stuff. So why trout? It's a really good indicator species in the freshwater environment. I'm sure you're all very familiar with trout yourselves, but you do get a sea-run version, same species as part of a population that goes to sea. But generally, we're looking at the populations that are kind of within the freshwater environment when we talk about brown trout. It's kind of what a lot of people identify them with. So why are they so good? Well, a few water quality monitoring folk that are very keen on how clean our rivers are, they're dependent completely on sort of clean and cool waters. So high oxygen demand, dissolved oxygen demand, sort of generally clean parameters in water quality to sort of support the habitat that they need to fulfill their life cycle. So within that life cycle, it's a wide range of physical habitats needed, whether that's for spawning. So we've got the full life cycle up on this infographic. Another reason we need sort of decent water quality, once those eggs are in the gravel, so they're laying their eggs at this time of year, they're spawning in the winter. They need good dissolved oxygen levels, clean water, lacking in sort of fine sediments, and as we found this spring, lacking in sort of high levels of macronutrients. So if you get algal blooms at the wrong time of year, it can sort of smother fry and eggs in the gravel too. And then within that, all of your macroinvertebrates that the trout are generally dependent on, so they're generally seen as a drift feeder. So they'll feed on lots of macroinvertebrates, whether they're sort of emerging, whether they're sort of in their juvenile stage, fully aquatic, or even terrestrial insects blown onto the water. And as they get a little bit bigger, they will start to select onto small fish species as well. But generally, depending on that wide range of sort of physical habitat. So within rivers, you're looking at sort of natural river habitat dynamics, providing those fish places that they can go and spawn and fill out the rest of their life cycle. And as I said at the beginning, we talk about trout. We are the Wild Trout Trust, but whatever's good for trout is generally good for aquatic biodiversity. So, if you've got brown trout in your river system, it's generally a really good indicator that you've got nice natural river habitat dynamics, you've got good water quality, you've got the right quantity of water as well. So one of the reasons we've all been brought together today, there's a few problems out there. Water quality is definitely taking the headlines now. But just sort of wanted to touch on the sort of other four kind of parameters that we need for sort of healthy fish populations. And within that, we've got healthy trout populations, as we said, we've got healthy aquatic biodiversity. So we always use this sort of three legs of the stool analogy. If we take water quality, that's key. So we need clean water. Water quantity, we need the water in the first place. So you can have too much of it, too much flooding, too little water. We just sort of need moderate conditions really for a wide range of aquatic biodiversity to exist. But within that, you definitely need the physical habitat. So if you don't have the habitat attributes for species to fulfill their life histories, you're not going to get the species in the first place necessarily. So habitat, water quality, water quantity, three legs of the stool. If you get those right, you're generally going to get healthy and abundant populations of trout. And if you've got healthy populations of trout, you can guarantee you've got a really thriving ecosystem around that. And whether that's just in the water as well, you've got, kind of emergent aquatic plants, you've got all the species that depend on healthy waterways, bats, birds, mammals, everything in between. So huge number of problems in our rivers in the 21st century. Obviously, you guys are out doing a great job monitoring the waterways, looking at rivers, looking at what's going on in them. First up, we've got to look at pollution, really. As we said, it's sort of taking the headlines. There's huge numbers of issues out there. We only have to go to the Rivers Trust portal for their sewage map, and you can see the sheer magnitude, both spatially across the country and the frequency of how much sewage is getting dumped on our rivers and how often. And within that, as Alex touched on, we've got problems that just getting sort of, even if they're reported, they're not necessarily responded to. There's one news article there, and that's just one standalone of, raw sewage being discharged into what should be special area conservation, SSSI, one of our sort of queen jewels in the crown chalk streams down in the south of England. So we've also got a large issue with sort of land management problems. So we often talk about sort of sewage treatment works, the issues that we've got with those, point source pollution with that. There's a lot of diffuse pollution, as you well know from your water quality samples. Great example here of a ring feeder that's been placed in the wrong place, grazing taking place in the wrong season. You can see the state of that field. That's all going straight into the watercourse. So whether it's livestock, whether it's arable, certainly in my neck of the woods, I see a huge amount of inappropriate kind of tilling of the land, winter wheat, all that kind of stuff. You've got lots of bare ground over the wettest months of the winter. That's all fine sediment going in the river. It's going to sort of completely neuter your aquatic biodiversity. It just smothers it out, as well as enriching the water. Going on to the water quantity, this time of year, we often think of floods. There's too much water around. Having just been through a complete drought year, I'm sure you've all experienced it in your areas. You can have too little water as well. So key critical to that is if you haven't got any water, you simply haven't got the ecosystem. So it's a good picture here of just simply no water whatsoever in that river channel there. Nothing's going to exist in it. And then we've got what the Wild Trout Trust focus on, physical habitat issues. So this is pure river channel modification here. So bad that it's incarcerated in concrete. So going back to that whole dynamic natural river habitat system that we need, if we look in this concrete river channel here, there's not a lot that's going to be able to exist in there. You're going to get a selection of invertebrates maybe in that. You can tell some poor water quality in here straight away in that algae that's growing in there. But not a lot else is going to be able to exist. And then we've got connectivity issues as well. So I can't think of the number off the top of my head, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of weirs, dams, barriers across the rivers across the UK. They can sever catchments. We've got a really good example here. I mean, nothing's getting through that. You're going to have populations stuck upstream of invertebrates and fish. You're going to have fully migratory species of fish that can't get upstream of that barrier. So any sort of weir or dam, and particularly one of that magnitude, is just bad news for rivers. And then just looking at how rivers have changed over time. This is some LiDAR data from one of my colleagues up in the north of the country here. And you can see what we'd call sort of a ghost river. So you can make those paleo channels out, hopefully, in the middle of the picture there, where a river's been gently meandering in the floodplain. And what we need rivers to do is gently meander in floodplains, aka wiggly rivers. So they're eroding material, depositing material. They're starting to form those river habitats. They make their way down to the sea. And this river has essentially been put into these very straight linear drainage channels across the floodplain. And then the right-hand side of that floodplain, you can probably make out the other channel that's conveying it downstream. So just going back to that previous slide of concrete channels, there's a large amount of that in this picture. Very little habitat formation, very little places for fish and other aquatic biodiversity to live. So, it's just not good for nature whatsoever. And then a really nice little sort of time series of this. So I'll let this run through a couple of times. We can look at how rivers have kind of changed over hundreds of years, really. So when we think about damage to rivers, we think, it's all happened since maybe the Industrial Revolution or something like that. As you probably all well know yourselves already, river modification has been going on since, Bronze Age, Roman times, thousands of years, basically. So similar to the previous slide in that upland catchment, this is very much the same. You can see sort of 200 years ago, drainage starts to happen, the river starts to get pushed around inside the floodplain, mill leach starts to come in, water conveyance starts to come in, land drainage starts to come in, and essentially all of that sinuosity, all of that sort of natural dynamic within the catchment of picking material up, forming river habitats, just completely lost. So what can we do about it? Well, first and foremost, Wild Trout Trust is here to help. I said to Alex earlier today, we're not the sort of be-all and end-all, the only people out there doing river habitat work. You've got a huge amount of effort going in for people like the Rivers Trust, the Wildlife Trusts, lots of NGOs. You've got the Environment Agency spearheading quite a lot of habitat restoration stuff. So essentially they'll fund people like the Wild Trout Trust to go out there and do work. So we're really a catalyst to encourage action on the ground as well as deliver it. But the main thing, the critical thing, is doing something about it. So it's all well and good sort of, observing the problem. You'll find this with your water quality sampling. You know what the issue is. It's about identifying the issue, getting out there and fixing it. So we've got what I like to call a sort of naked river on the left-hand picture here. If you compare it to the right-hand picture, which has got all of that lovely natural river process, there's materials being picked up, deposited. You've got really nice diversity of flow, so it's different velocities, different depths. You've got a wide range of niches for a wide range of biodiversity to live in. You go back over to the left-hand picture, you'll see it's just basically a conveyance channel. There's not a lot of spaces for wildlife in there. So one of the things to do at Wild Trout Trust to start off with fixing it is an advisory visit. So this is basically funded through rod license money from the Environment Agency. And it's just giving originally sort of angling clubs, but it has kind of widened out to whoever needs them, a tool to kind of go out and look at what the issue is and where the issue is. So the recipient, as we'll call it, could be an angling club, it could be an individual, it could be a wildlife trust even. I've done one recently for Wildlife Trust. So it's just a walk and a talk. So, what's the section of the river under their jurisdiction, what they think the problems are, and sort of just explaining and discussing, where improvements might be able to be made. So as part of that, it's very pictorial and advisory visit. So once we get the information, we write it up into a nice report, and it's very much a sort of walkthrough. So it's sort of what we've seen that's good, what we've seen that's bad, lots of pictures, lots of explaining. And that's so it's accessible to everyone. So I've just done one from a community startup group locally around here. And by their own confession, they're like, look, we don't really know anything about river habitats. So the advisory visit report I've done for them, it's very much sort of like the basics kind of thing, but all the way up to taking them into some more technical kind of concepts as well. So it's accessible, but it's not, lacking the technicality that needs to fix the river, if that makes sense. So that's where we get to the end of the report, and that's where the recommendations come in. So finding out what the issue is, working with the people who are hoping to do some good on the river, listing that down in the report, and then the sort of how you can fix it. And quite often that will lead on to Wild Trout Trust or other folks in the catchment going back and sort of doing some demonstration work. So the next thing we can offer is a practical demonstration. And that's getting a gang of good people full of goodwill, full of enthusiasm, and lots of energy on the day to come out and actually physically install the habitat. So we've got ex-Wild Trout Trust colleague Mike Blackmore at the back there, Rob Mongoven's just in the front there. And with this team of volunteers, these guys have basically gone and put in this kind of really messy, brashy, large woody material kind of, I guess you could call it embankment on the right-hand side here. And the idea is they basically pinch this river down. So I'm imagining straight away from this picture, the channel's been modified at some point. There's not many river habitat features in there. The flow's very linear. It's not really got the sort of dynamism to kind of forge some new habitats there. So they put this work in, pinch the river down, and when you go back in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years time, the river's had a chance to sort of get a purchase and start to sort of do some good work by itself. So a lot of river restoration work now is moving away from kind of a more traditional fisheries management, I guess you could call it, where you're kind of putting features in for fish. It's more about kickstarting this the natural river processes basically. So it's just giving the river a push in the right direction. So it's very hands-on. Another couple of conservation officers there. There's Tim Jacklin on the left, keeping his head out of the way of a swinging mallet. But it's all about getting hands-on, waders wet, basically, getting people involved, getting some good habitat in, and having lots of fun doing it as well. So you can probably tell by those smiles, you know, it is good fun. Get the waders on, you know, get your hands dirty, and actually do some really good stuff for getting some river habitat back in place. So following on from that, this can be sort of, I guess you could call it larger scale stuff. So if the practical visits are for sort of fishing clubs, community interest groups, you can kind of give the demo to these folks, give them an advisory visit, give them recommendations. They can then crack on and deliver a lot of it themselves. A bigger river restoration project might be, you know, having to put sort of permits in, get some additional funding in the region of £1,000 all the way through to £500,000, depending on the scale of the restoration project. And you might have that fishing club, well, the fishing club or the community group will be directly involved with the outcomes, but it might be sort of project managed by Wild Trout Trust or a Rivers Trust or the Environment Agency directly. So we've got another colleague, Nick Lawrence here. So he's just putting some brashy bundles in, aka faggots, but very hairy ones, down in a chalk stream somewhere in his patch. So he covers kind of Test Ditch in Hampshire Avon, all that kind of area. So the other thing with the conservation officers, it's very much the experiences are kind of tuned into their local patch, because rivers obviously vary massively across the country and the sort of interventions they need for habitat restoration. We've got another great example here with Andy Thomas. So he's putting in some green oak low-cost baffles here. So the point is, it doesn't always have to be massive. A project, you know, you can have a big effect by doing something as simple as putting some baffles in a culvert, and suddenly you've opened this river up and made it accessible for fish to move up and downstream as they need to. That concrete pad underneath the bridge arch there is going to be pretty inaccessible to most fish during low flows. And then you've got things like this, which is reinstating a paleo channel. So just putting water back into a river channel where it used to be. So if you cast your mind back to that LiDAR map we were looking at, where there's a straightened channel outside of the view of this picture, this is basically highlighting what it looks like when you put water back into those old channels where the river wants to be. And as soon as you do that, you're basically expanding the habitat accessible for all aquatic species that will use it. But being rather species focused, you know, you're expanding the habitat massively for gravel spawning fish such as trout. So this is a very small trout fry, what we call a 0+ fry, absolutely teeny wee. So it's probably only hatched out of the gravels in the week or two before this picture was taken. But the point being, once you put that river back where it wants to be, you've suddenly expanded the habitat accessible for spawning greatly compared with probably what was there before. We'll have a really nice look at a little aerial video in a second just to highlight that. So this was a project done by Rob Mongoven on the River Witham. And just sort of explain this picture you're looking at. You've got this sort of wetland pool in the middle of the picture. There's an embankment, and then you can probably make out the river running underneath the trees just in the middle of the picture. So looking at river habitat quality there, well, firstly, the river's completely disconnected from the floodplain. So, okay, you've got some wet on the floodplain, but that flood embankment's basically preventing that river from coming up naturally, spilling out onto the floodplain, and then easing its way back in. So what you get is a flood. Let's keep it straightforward and look at fish. Fish spilled out onto the floodplain and then can't get back into the river because they're trapped out on the floodplain. Floodwaters recede, fish are stranded, and it's an ecological impact, basically. The other thing we've got here is a very, very linear river channel. So it's really lacking that kind of dynamism, the sort of sinuosity, the meanders that we look for in rivers that are forming those kind of areas of deposition, the riffles, the pools, the things that species need to complete their life cycles. So this is what it looks like after Rob got his hands on it. So you can probably see the difference there straight away. The flood embankment's been removed in the middle of the picture. So straight away, that river can kind of work with the floodplain as it should do. It looks a big mess there. It's a big brown field, but what I've actually done there is lowered areas. So you've got some really nice floodplain wetlands there. So it's fantastic for botanical diversity, obviously wetland wading birds, all that kind of stuff. And if you look in the channel there, there's a huge amount of gravel imported into this site. So I think there's something like 500 tons. You can see straight away that river is now not an overly wide, overcapacity, boring, homogeneous channel with limited ecological value. We've got all these lovely islands in there. We're pushing the flow around. You've got flow diversity. You're going to have shallow bits that things are spawning on. You've got deeper bits that things can find refuge in. You're basically driving biodiversity there. So that's an example of a much bigger sort of river restoration project. Going back to those barriers, huge issue in the rivers as we talked about. This is a big weir. You've got bigger out there. Wild Trout Trust has certainly dealt with bigger ones. I think Tim, who dealt with this project, would certainly say it's probably one of the most difficult Wild Trout Trusts I've ever dealt with. So this was the Snake Lane Weir up in Derbyshire on the River Ecclesbourne. And the big issue with this one, I mean, obviously it's severing the catchment in half. So anything that's fully fresh water, it can't utilize that river properly anyway. And it's worth adding, you probably already know this, all freshwater fish species need to use different parts of the catchment at different times of the year anyway. So even if they're not going out to sea, even if they're not like a classic, like a sort of salmon or a sea lamprey or something like that truly need to migrate up a river, this weir is still going to have a big effect. But as it stands with the salmon population, they used to be present upstream of this weir, and then they haven't been for hundreds of years because there's been a barrier in their way, basically. So weir got removed. Basically got changed up to something called a rock ramp. So there's lots of big stones in the bottom of that riverbed now, kind of slows the flow down, lets all species have a sort of way through. Also with sort of invertebrates as well, in their sort of fully aquatic phase of their life, they can kind of crawl up and down along the riverbed there, drift down through the river as they should do. So you're not disrupting their life cycles. But the really good news, immediately from removing that weir, the following winter, upstream, a carcass of a spawned out salmon was found. So it just goes to show, proof positive like that, if you remove weirs, if you build it essentially, they will come, I think is the expression, isn't it? So, once that weir was out the way, catchments opened up again. The salmon immediately found their way upstream of there, back onto spawning grounds that haven't utilised for hundreds of years. And then just onto this video, and before I press play, going back to the River Witham floodplain river restoration project I was showing you about. So when we're talking about sort of boring, homogeneous river channels, we're sort of talking about something that's not got any change in sort of width or depth, and it's not sort of wiggling, it's not pushing itself around. It's just not going to sort of form those river habitats. So what a lot of folks are doing in Wild Trout Trust on the sort of lower energy river systems, particularly, across the UK, but particularly on some of the chalk streams and lower sort of gradient rivers, large woody material is hugely important for kickstarting process. And if you want to see a good example of this, we'll press play on this. just by dropping this tree in on the right-hand side of this picture, the one that's lying in the river channel there, you'll see it's pushed that flow, it's squeezed the channel, so it's increased the velocity, it's increased the stream power. That's then eroded into that left-hand bank. And in a couple of floods, it's blown out this huge gravel bar here, which has then pinched the channel again, split it, re-energized it, and then it goes out into this lovely long riffle and then into a glide further down in that video there. So straight away, if I just play that again, you can just see the diversity there. You've got deeper water habitats, you've got overhanging vegetation, you've got gravel to spawn on, you've got marginal slacks, you've got riffles, you've got the whole gamut there. So from what would have been just this linear kind of habitat, U-shaped channel, same depth, same flow, just by dropping a tree in there, you can see the effect for a good 100 meters or two downstream. So if you repeat that through a section, before you know it, you've actually got a really thriving, really resilient bit of river going on. See if it'll let me go on to the next slide. We're going to be stuck on this. Okay, so that's that. So getting our rivers right. This is basically what it comes down to. Your river needs you. So that's a run through sort of what the Wild Trout Trust does. Lots of our friends and colleagues in Rivers Trust and Wildlife Trust do the same. Essentially, we are facilitators of getting the work done. So yes, we might deliver a huge river restoration project, but oftentimes it really is, in this day and age, like you're finding with your water quality sampling, power to the people. So it's about getting people interested in their river and then giving them a catalyst so they can actually get in there and go and do something about it. So, you know, it's all well and good saying, okay, well, we can fix rivers, but I'd guess you'd probably unanimously say, well, how can we do it? So this is what folks like myself, folks like Alex are here to do, just help you get involved, because these rivers really do depend on your input and help. So Wild Trout Trust wise, like I said, there's 10 conservation officers across the UK. We've got Gareth, who's basically on the Scottish borders, covers Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland. 3 of the guys are up in the true north of England. You've got myself and Tim, we're kind of covering the Midlands. Rob's over in East Anglia. Theo down in the West Country. And then David, Nick and Andy are down in the sort of true south/southeast, covering the chalk streams. So just to kind of introduce these guys, I'm guessing you guys are kind of water quality sampling across the UK, across the country. If you are interested in getting involved in sort of river habitat restoration, Wild Trout Trust work, you know, definitely give us a call, because we can kind of allocate you one of these officers to kind of see what they're up to, and come and help out, which would be fantastic. So I'll leave this slide up for a second. If you just sort of work down the list of job titles there, you'll sort of see where the various folks are, and who might be in your sort of region there. By all means, if you're not sure, just give me an email there. So one of my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6th person down there, Noyes at Wild Trout. There's my phone number. I can certainly pass you on to the right person. No problem at all. But if I just leave that up for a second there. And like I say, lots of this work wouldn't happen without the energy, input, and enthusiasm of a huge army of volunteers out there. So I can't underline how important you guys, if you are interested in getting involved, are to getting this stuff done. So that's the final slide. There's a lovely picture of a wild brown trout, which I know you'll all be happy to see. But I guess, Alex, if I just take that slide down, are there any questions? And thanks very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you. That was fantastic. Yeah, it's always nice to know. Well, Trout Trust been doing a lot of great stuff for a long time, so it's nice. Hopefully, we can build some connections. And like I said, that if you didn't get a chance to get the numbers and from that slide in time, I'll send it out next week as well to everyone. So by all means, get in touch, and then we can see, because it should be a really nice collaboration, really, to try and get that next thing from we've got the data. We did the campaigning. I know a lot of groups are doing restoration work themselves as well, but Wild Trout Trust have got a lot of expertise with Ed and everyone else. I can see Howard's got his hand up.
Yeah, Ed, one of the problems we've got on the upper Itchen is blanket weed. And that only seems, I don't know, it's my imagination, to have really come into play in the last 5 to 10 years. Any advice on what we can do about blanket weed?
Thanks, Howard. Well, I think it's a really good point to make to kick off with, really, because obviously you guys are looking at water quality. I've just presented on the physical habitat. It is this sort of holistic kind of approach to rivers, isn't it? It's not one thing on its own. So, you could have the best physical habitat in the upper Itchen there, but if you put an enriched sort of water quality over the top of it, you get the blanket weed. It's going to suppress a lot of the habitat that's required there. So advice-wise, I guess when it comes to this kind of issue with nitrates and phosphates, the diffuse stuff coming off agriculture, it is more about kind of pressure and lobbying, which is kind of where Angling Trusts are very good at doing this, because it's a big scale thing. It's about kind of getting farmers to do the right thing. Farmers are under a lot of pressure. They're using the land harder and harder at the moment, particularly post-Brexit and stuff. And at a local scale, I guess down in Hampshire, you're looking at your sort of catchment advisors. So they'll probably be housed with Natural England, I guess, catchment-sensitive farming. So it's to advise the farmers to do the right thing. Obviously, you've got stewardship schemes. So those guys are expert in sort of advising farmers, if they take some land out of production, if they don't sort of put so much fertilizer down in a certain area, there's the payment you can get for it. So it's sort of like a two level thing, and unfortunately, it is sort of higher level. It's not really in the hands of, say, us as locals to kind of go in there and elicit a big difference on a river when it comes to things like nitrates and phosphates. It's about people like the Environment Agency, people like Natural England, getting involved with the actual action on the ground, and then outside of that, kind of going to people like the Angling Trust and saying, can you sort of put a bit of pressure on, getting the right kind of systems and subsidies in place, I guess, for land management, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, it's not just land management. It's where we live in the upper Itchen. There's very few villages that are on mains drainage, so there are a lot of septic tanks and very old septic tanks. And I think in the upper Test, Janet's nodding her head there. That's a problem as well, as the agricultural side of things. I was hoping you were going to give me a silver bullet, but you've just reiterated all the things that we know about already, but and trying to fix.
And it can seem a bit demotivating, I guess. Silver bullets, sort of lip service, all this kind of stuff. We all get it, don't we? And it's like, well, how are we going to fix it? I'd still say local action and local knowledge for you guys that are local on the river. Almost making sure that's getting fed back to local, even Rivers Trust staff. So, for instance, the local Rivers Trust, they'll be out doing things like, I don't know, sewage safaris. Where's sewage coming from? All this kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with kind of feeding that into them and saying, look, we've got these issues with septic tanks. Is there some sort of project we can come up with, or what are the routes to kind of getting those homeowners to upgrade their septic tanks so there's not a problem in what is an SAC river, as I believe at the Itchen.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't lose faith with all that sort of higher level guff I've just given you there. If you wanted to do some local action, I guess even just putting your heads together and sort of loosely mapping where you think some of the issues are coming from, knocking a few doors with some of the local delivery organisations, that might be a good start.
Yeah, we're already doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're speaking some of the most active people that we've got. And I mean, you put up Fullerton as one of the news articles. I wouldn't be surprised if Howard or someone else in the catchment was responsible for the article and the sort of, well, I know you were involved a lot in the campaigning around the sewage treatment works there. So yeah, there's, again, we just got to keep it on going. I'll pass over to Alan.
Yeah, I think it was partly an observation as well as a question. I think I guess our interest is on we're focused on the Pill Hill Brook, which is headwater. Kind of, you've got the Test above that you've got the Anton, then you've got the Pill Hill Brook, amongst others, as a kind of mixture of a winterbourne and a river that kind of exists through the year. So I think the challenges that we seem to face are that we're kind of learning what we've got at the moment through the water quality monitoring and the kick sampling. But I think it's building from that is, well, okay, as we understand what we've got, what could we have? What could we expect? And is there anything we could do to try and encourage some of the stuff you've been talking about today? So we don't really see, in particular, I've got a particular site on the Pill Hill Brook, which is close to the source. So at that point, it dries up. There's perhaps not a lot we can do about that, but further downstream, then the water does seem to continue throughout the year. It can vary. It can vary year on year, obviously depending on the weather conditions, etc. But I think it's trying to build a picture of when we understand what we've got, what might we expect if it was better, and how could we make it better? And it varies throughout the stretch of the river. We've got something like a 9 or 10k long stretch, and I guess the treatments, the restoration, etc., would be different at different points of the river.
Yeah, it's a really good point to make, Alan. I mean, absolutely, it's I love it. It's catchment thinking already, isn't it? So it's not just, you've got to look at the site and then you've got to look at the reach, haven't you? But it's sort of thinking about out with that. And I guess the point you're making there, it's a really good one. So going back to that kind of sequence I was showing of that river changing over whatever it was, 400 or 500 years kind of thing. What's our reference point? What are we trying to get back to? So I guess that's the big conversation in restoration. It's like, what are you trying to restore? You know, what are you trying to achieve, as you're exactly as you're saying there. The other side, to flip that coin over, you can look at sort of enhancement. So just talking from the sort of, say you've got the water quantity, okay, you haven't in your winterbourne up there, but further downstream, all that kind of stuff, you've got the water quality. You know, what could you expect there if you put physical habitat in? I guess something that's ecologically rich. So if you kind of put it there, you can see what turns up. Obviously, an exercise in biological records is a good one. So if you're in Hampshire, I'm sure there'll be a really good access to the Hampshire Biological Records Centre. You can kind of look at what's existed there. The National Biodiversity Network, they've still got a biological records map up online you can look at. You can kind of see what was there and think about what should be there. But I guess generally the nice thing with river restoration is if you're looking even just at putting enhancements in, so even if you're just sort of like putting a tree in or pushing the flow around a little bit, your kick sampling will probably show you that very, very quickly because things will come and utilize it. With regards to actual sort of species distributions, you'd want sort of to take a little bit more interest there and sort of look at what was in the catchment, what is in the catchment further downstream as well, that can kind of come back and repopulate your section there. And then it's obviously monitoring to kind of prove the point.
Yeah, I think the experience that we get is that some of the anecdotal information we get is that years ago, people remember fishing in stretches of the water, and we're kind of looking at it thinking, well, how did you do that then? Because there's no water there for half of the year.
Yeah.
So what has changed? How has it changed? And I guess touching on what you've covered before, you've got the element of how what is flourishing further downstream, how that can be attracted into our stretches of the water, but then also the awareness that actually what we've got upstream benefits potentially or inhibits what you've got downstream as well. So it's learning, it's understanding from both angles.
That's great. It's great points there. Definitely, Alan. So it's also kind of understanding that species ecology, isn't it? So if we look at trout, for instance, I guess in chalk streams they don't move around too much. I mean, some will out of a population. More rain-fed rivers like I've got here, they'll go tens and tens of kilometers to kind of go and spawn. So they're going up to the headwaters, they'll spawn. That's where your juveniles are coming from. They're then seed stocking the rest of the river downstream over the next 2 or 3 years. So certainly on those river systems, when I'm talking to angling clubs, their main river, and they're saying, well, we want to stop stocking, but how do we get recruitment here? It's like, well, you don't get recruitment here. You've got to go and talk to the landowner 10 kilometers upstream and make sure that they're looking after the headwater streams up there, because that's where your trout are going to spawn to then come and populate down the river again. Just as one example, and selfishly from a vested interest of wild trout, but just to prove the point, it's sort of both ways. So it's stuff moving upstream, but it's also stuff that we utilize, the upper river to kind of then repopulate the river further down. But with regards to the water quantity, obviously that's a hot topic in chalk country. You've got lots of over abstraction, those winterborns. How would you go about this? There is the Hydrology Data Explorer. So a lot of this is available online now, open government license. You can kind of do your own sort of super sleuthing. I will put some links in the chat for you, Janet. So Hydrology Data Explorer, it just depends on how far back those records go. But you will be able to sort of look at equivalent rainfall events versus what's been recorded sort of river level wise or even sort of river discharge wise. So you can kind of look at, I don't know, 50 years ago, we getting X amount of rain. Was that winterborn flowing regularly? That might even be sort of anecdotal local records versus now you've got lots of over abstraction. You've got lots of sort of pressure on those aquifers, haven't you? So the chances are probably it's not running where it could or should or would be running in comparison sort of 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, I can see Martin's eager to jump in. So I'll go and then we'll come back to Janet on the Pearl Hill Brook as well.
Ed, thanks for your presentation. That's really interesting stuff. I guess, I know a lot of these people on this call, and we all know that our lovely chalk streams here in Hampshire have been so messed about. It's untrue, whether it's over abstraction, sucking the life out of them, land drainage boards over 40 years doing their best to destroy them and make them into straight channels. Or I guess recently we've got lots of issues, we think, with chemicals which are causing immense harm to the invertebrates. But I guess the question I got on the restoration work, down here it's Wessex Rivers Trust do an awful lot of restoration work too. How do you guys coordinate? Because one of the things I do see all the time is if you wrote down all of the organisations involved supporting, trying to protect or improve chalk streams, you've got a list about a page long. And we're all doing our best, but we're not necessarily doing the same stuff at the right time in the right place. So how do you, for instance, work with Wessex Rivers Trust?
It's an excellent point, Martin. So, I guess there's an evolution of organisations there as well. So, Wild Trout Trust, I think it's probably fair to say, was the equivalent of the original Rivers Trust movement. So it kind of sparked that kind of, here's rivers, here's issues, let's get in there, the waders on. And then it's kind of chugged along as a sort of fisheries kind of interest specialist group kind of thing. And the Rivers Trust has now evolved into this huge movement, which is fantastic. So there is this sort of eternal question of like, where does Wild Trout Trust fit into this landscape? But thankfully, we do kind of say we are sort of fisheries technical kind of bent, so we kind of augment some of the more generic kind of water quality stuff going on. How do we work together? There's another link I can add. It's called the catchment based approach. So it's funded by the Environment Agency, always an acronym. So it's CABA, capital C, lowercase a, capital B, capital A, and it's basically a talking shop to make sure that we can all coordinate. So particularly in the NGO sector, the charity sector, we're all dependent on funding. So we'd obviously have big issues if we didn't coordinate around funding and outputs around that. So it's a sort of biannual meeting. Some of these CABA groups, they do them sort of every 3 or 4 months kind of thing, a little bit more frequently. But it's about all those partners getting in the same place, sharing what they're looking to do, sharing the issues in the catchment, and sort of divvying it out so that everyone's trying to work together in a more synergistic way. There is a bit of an organic kind of thing around that as well. So, for instance, you'll have Wessex Rivers Trust, they're doing loads of river restoration, and then you'll have maybe an individual riparian owner saying, Wild Trout Trust, can you kind of come along and do something, a little bit smaller scale? It doesn't fit into that funding. So, bit of both, basically, CABA and then sort of just an organic, we all muddle through quite happily together. Or we like to think happily together anyway.
Ed, it's Howard. Could I just chip in there? Are you aware of Project Whiteheart, launched by the Atlantic Salmon Trust just recently?
Only by name, I did see it. So by all means, bring me up to speed with that. I didn't fully read into the article, but I did see it, Howard.
No, I mean, they've got big plans for river restoration and stuff, basically aimed at the Atlantic salmon, obviously on the test and the etching. Yeah, it would be good a good organisation to have on your Christmas card list, I think.
No, absolutely. And I'm a little bit of a phony here because obviously there are the chalk stream specialists. We've got David Oakley and Nick Lawrence that are down in chalk stream country firmly, and I know David Oakley's getting involved with some of the salmon habitat restoration stuff. So it goes back to that point: what's good for brown trout? Well, it's good for their cousins, the salmon. It's good for grading. It's good for everything else in the river. So, it's a little bit limiting sometimes having a species-specific name like Wild Trout Trust, but we work for salmonids generically. So, David's a sort of natural agent to kind of deliver some of that habitat work. So I believe, and I'll stand corrected, those guys are kind of a little bit embedded with this White Hart project.
Yes, yeah, I think so. And just a little bit of anecdotal evidence. While Wessex Rivers Trust did some restoration work on a beat I look after as river keeper on the lower Itchin, I was doing my water quality sampling and invertebrate monitoring on Monday this week, and there's 3 new trout reds where they've done their restoration work.
Oh, fantastic. There you go. That's the proof we need to know about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it probably sums up the question of how do we work with the Wessex Rivers Trust, that we've gone on to 3 other organisations and collaborations in the space. There's a lot of different points of contact, which I think is maybe a good thing, that it's not all centralised completely in one sort of thing. But it's challenging to even know what's going on sort of 5 miles down the road, let alone sort of national scale. It's conversations like this where we throw up some different things like Project White Hart or anything like that, is, I suppose, that's the way it happens, really. I wish it were a bit more straightforward and on the data side as well. But we'll keep asking the questions anyway. I'll pass over to Janet.
Sorry, really quickly, Alex, this good thing to point out though, but it's a but, and it's a really big but. Don't know if I should be careful saying this, but the noise you guys can make as the interested public is becoming quite a powerful thing. Don't underestimate it. So you can have Environment Agency, they're driving kind of some of the outputs. You've got, the sort of charities like us, we're kind of like a few staff trying to do some stuff kind of thing. What you guys start to say, when you see problems, if you're like, we need this problem fixed, it's getting increasingly important. And look at all the monitoring you're doing, off your own backs, the effort you're putting in. So yes, there's lots of different organizations, but don't, not include yourself in that kind of mix at all as an interest group.
Sorry, go on, Janet.
Sorry, Janet.
It's okay. It's really just wondering. So we do our water quality monitoring once a month. Everything that all our results seem to be okay. We do that in line with kick sampling, and the kick sampling has shown that over a period of time, the abundance of the species that we're monitoring is gradually growing, which is great. So the issue that we've got with the Pill Hill Brook Association is that our members are saying, well, everything's okay, and it's trying to keep them engaged in, because everything's okay, it's trying to keep them engaged in what's going on. So my thought is, we're only doing it once a month. Is there any other suggestions of how we might be able to monitor or more regularly, or put some devices in the river that would continue to monitor, like sondes? I know there's a cost involved in that, but it's just really asking, how do we try to keep everybody engaged because they think everything's okay? That's my question.
I think building on that, Janet, I think one of the challenges we get is that the majority of the river is obviously on private land, so we've got limited access to it, and there's a degree of trust that the riparian owners are engaged, understand what's needed, and do stuff which we may not necessarily be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the the land ownership can obviously throw up a lot of challenges, not least in your catchment. But I mean, that's exactly, I think you saw the pictures of sort of the hands-on habitat stuff. I think, like you say, it's a pretty well, it's just the same process every time of going out and doing the water quality monitoring, which obviously I think is very valuable. But the sort of restoration that Ed's doing, I mean, if there's anything to reinvigorate a community to sort of pay attention and be custodians of the river, I think actually getting in and finding out more as well from real experts who will be able to. I mean, I've gone on a river walk with Ed, and it was just really fun. It sort of made me want to go out there more as well. So I think, yeah, exactly the sort of stuff that Wild Trout Trust do is a fantastic way to reinvigorate. But I'll pass over to Ed, who'll probably do a better job at selling the Angling Trust than the Wild Trout Trust.
Well, I can sell that Angling Trust as well. So the water quality monitoring network. But it's another great point, and you guys are kind of pulling out some of the challenges we have in the industry. It's about community group and enthusiasm and continual engagement. So I think Riverfly is a really good one for this. Probably if you go and look at some of the results there, you'll get a few samples going on. You know, you've got a really enthusiastic pair going out doing it for a few months. You know, they start to think it's okay, or interest wanes or something. You know, that site then gets lost, kind of thing. So it's maintaining that enthusiasm is definitely a challenge. And just going back to what Howard was saying really about those reds, it's kind of boxing clever, I guess, with kind of, you know, what people might find interesting. So it's sort of like, okay, well, it's good, but how could it be better? Well, if you can find a site that's a good reference for maybe better, or you've had some river restoration go on down there, you know, going down at the right time of year and seeing that there's a load of reds there where you haven't got them in your section, it's kind of like, okay, well, you've got good, but this is better, and this is what can happen if you sort of push the habitat forward. With regards to long-term monitoring, probably one for Alex to answer with regards to water quality. I don't see why not, though. If you had some interest from the agency, particularly the Environment Agency, you know, they might be able to sort of fund you or something to do that.
I think one of the things that we're doing on the Pill Hill book as well is expanding the remit, if you like. So we initially focused on the water quality monitoring, the kick sampling, and then it's building from that is things like surveying for water voles, monitoring for mink, and then also INNS, floral INNS work, and that's a piece of work that I've done. In particular, I've done river walks, trying to identify what we've got, where we've got it, and it's building from that. And then with Janet, we're talking about kicking off in the new year a kind of plan to take that forward, and hopefully to try and get wider engagement within our monitoring group, who are, if you like, our citizen scientists, volunteers, but then also the riparian owners.
Yeah. I think it would be a very good idea for you to get in touch with David Oakley, because he's local to you guys anyway. He's only down at Overton, I think. So he's a conservation officer on the test. He will, I'm assuming it's okay to say this for him. I'm sure it will be 100%, but he can come along, he can walk the river with you. He can definitely look at that physical habitat element, and certainly deliver potentially some interventions. So not only can you get your group involved, so it's hands-on, you know, it helps build the sort of interest and involvement there. You can then monitor the effect of change then, can't you? So it's all well and good monitoring, isn't it? You're sort of like, okay, this is what we've got, but it's sort of, you know, what next? Where should it be, kind of thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, David Oakley would be your man, definitely. He's your local man on the patch from Wild Trout Trust. I'm sure they'd love to come and have a look.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's a really nice example there of that sort of extra stuff we can do, because obviously there's a hell of a lot of campaigning going on with different groups, and like we said, with some of the issues that Howard identified earlier, you know, we do need to do that bigger picture lobbying stuff to try and get these nutrients done, sorted out as well, and chemicals and microparticulates and everything else. But these, yeah, river walks and everything else that the Wild Trout Trust do, one, are fantastic for just energizing a community to keep on going with what can be a bit of a slog at times, with keeping projects like this going, and two, can actually lead to really, as you've seen from Ed's lovely videos and everything else, really positive, tangible stuff. I mean, and there's about 100 things that have come out today that I hadn't heard of before, different databases that I'm sure every conservation officer at the Wild Trout Trust has got a different range of expertise and stuff to bring to the table. So they're they're amazing resource. So yeah, if anyone can, I'll share that again later with all the contact details. But yeah, by all means, it sounds like it'd be worthwhile on the in Pill Hill and hopefully elsewhere as well, I'm sure. Howard.
Just as an aside, I've just sent you some videos that Kieran Gillingham from the Angling Trust, he's a water bailiff for them, and some lovely underwater footage of trout and salmon running upstream, and some decent sized fish as well this month, just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
That's
awesome.
good news.
That's some good footage
That's
as well.
on the Itchen. Is that on the Itchen, Howard?
On the Itchen at Bishopstoke and Shawford.
That's very good to hear.
Trying to
They're on your WhatsApp.
yeah, let me see. Right, I'm going to do some. This is going to be very high tech now.
Alex, a quick question. What's best for these website links? Shall I take 2 minutes now just to put them in the chat, or shall I send them to you and do you want to send them around?
If you want to jot them in the chat, that would be good, just so, because I won't get the email out until next week. But then I'll also send out any extra links that that spring to mind, because it sounds like those are some really good good resources. Sorry to give you another task, really busy typing away. In the meantime, I'm trying to figure out a way to share this amazing video. Aside from trying to show it on the screen itself, Howard, I'm struggling.
I can't help you there, I'm afraid.
You might 1 second. All right, I'm going to try. Okay, you can sort of see it. I'm going to share my screen. I think it's worth it. We're going to get some. It doesn't do justice to the video because it's actually some of the best footage I've seen in a long time. This is amazing. I know that doesn't work, does it? Is my screen bigger now?
No.
Well, no. Okay. This is where I think I took it as a success that earlier on Ed was actually able to present in Teams, but this is clearly a hurdle too far.
Too far.
Yeah, I'll try and if I can, I'll try and put that video on the next newsletter, Howard, just for a nice little like a good little salmon video. But they are.
Yeah. Well, there's trout and
salmon,
sea trout and salmon running up the lower Itchen.
Was this just with like a sort of GoPro on a stick job?
Yeah. And
yeah.
That was in the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, I have to say I've tried similar and it's never looked anything like that.
No, he's quite good with the GoPro. Is Kieran?
No, fair play. We just hang on just for those few links come through, and then like I say, then I'll share them again in the newsletter next week, along with the phone numbers and contact details of everyone else. Do we have any questions, whether it's about wider water quality monitoring stuff or just anything for Ed whilst we've got him here for a few more minutes? If not, just hang on for Ed to quickly rabbit away finding some links. So I think that especially that historical data is something personally I've not tried to put to use before, and I think it seems like a really useful thing. Has anyone used any of these databases that are coming through before?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, actually, this is good.
I think the Cabba, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
one, if you like historic maps, let me just drop one in here quickly. I'll just find the link for you. It's really good fun. This one here. I mean, obviously you'll have to play around with some of these and work out how they work. For this one, you'll be able to get maps back to the 1800s potentially, and you can do this little side-by-side thing and look at, you know, the river channel in this day and age and how it compares to historic maps.
Oh.
Giving away all the trade secrets here. There you
Yeah.
go.
That's it. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's good.
About the one nice thing I like about scrolling through LinkedIn is it just seems to be, for me, completely chock full of some amazing maps that people have made, which I'm sure was. I'm not jealous of the process of creating maps anytime I've tried to do GIS, but I like looking at them. So that'll be a nice one for me to look at as well. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and huge thanks to Ed for an interesting talk. And hopefully, I think this would be a really, really fruitful partnership going forward, hopefully. So yeah, unless there's